Please listen to this. George Floyd. This is what they're dealing with now. This is the aftermath. Please listen.
Happened. They say it's time for the city to start over from scratch and reimagine public safety.
Policing as a concept has had a complete monopoly on public safety.
And City Council member Jeremiah Ellison says it's been a failure.
And I don't just mean a failure because it has perpetuated the kind of harm that you see in police killings and things that fall well short of police killings that still constitute harm, but it also fails to keep people safe proactively.
The council wants to amend the city charter, which now requires a police force with a minimum staffing level. That requires voter approval. Among those opposing the move is Mayor Jacob Fry. He says the council hasn't provided any alternative plan.
We have all this anger and frustration and sadness, and all of this energy, and it's our obligation to channel that energy and harness it towards something that is specific and productive, not vague and ambiguous.
Amid the debate over policing, Minneapolis has seen both a spike in violent crime and a record number of complaints against the department since the city erupted in protests after Floyd's killing. Protests that resulted in a police precinct being burned after officers were ordered to evacuate.
Our morale has never been lower. They're scared to death to answer calls in case something turns violent because they're actively trying to send us to prison.
Sergeant Rich Walker, who worked at the precinct, told a Minnesota Senate committee that as many as 200 officers, about a quarter of the entire force, may soon depart.
This goes beyond insanity. This is gross. I would almost call it negligence, but it's gross terrorism being developed right in front of our very eyes towards a group of thugs that's wanting to hijack this particular movement and turn it into something that it never, ever was supposed to have turned into to begin with. Whenever you have police officers that are scared to do their jobs based around rhetoric, based around propaganda, based around ideology that don't even meet the criteria of safety, much less anything else, then is whenever you have a failed society. And if that be the case, that's whenever God, the man upstairs, steps in, and that's whenever we just think that we've seen horror on judgment of pertaining to all this. Listen to the rest of this. If this don't make your hair curl, won't nothing. Listen to it.
A number have filed disability claims.
And this ain't something that went on a year ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago during the civil rights movement. This is something that's going on right now, today. Right up the road, coming near a neighborhood near you, just like the Walmart slogan.
I've never been more broken as a police officer than I was to watch our leaders give up on our home. And the truth is, the leaders of Minneapolis failed Minneapolis.
Mayor Fry said,
and every one of them needs to be arrested. Not the police, but the mayors, city council. They all need to go to jail for terrorism type sympathizers. They're sympathizing in terrorist type, homegrown terrorist type activities. They need to go to jail, Mr. President. If there's ever been a time that you needed to step in to show your authority pertaining to how these towns and how these cities are being run, I truly believe it's now. And people are going to say, Juby, you've lost your mind. You're asking for tyranny. No, what we're asking for is safety and security. In my occupation that I had to endev myself into after I fell off a 4-story building. That is all that they preached to us from day one, was safety, 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 safety. Whenever you put families in these automobiles, some of them are very, very smart. Some of them are very, very unsmart. Some of them are very, very poor, but some of them are very, very rich. And whenever you put families in these cars that's been involved in an accident, they're expecting for that car to buckle, crinkle, for the airbags to go off. They're expecting for life-supporting securities to be just as if it was before it was ever engaged in an accident. A matter of fact, I just had a telephone call today of Toyota. I got a 2005 Tundra that they have went in and remodified my right passenger airbag. I kept getting these letters. This particular procedure that they done on my vehicle was about 4 years ago. I keep getting these letters thinking, how come you people are continue badgering me over this same procedure? I call them up. I investigate it a little bit further. Come to find out it's something else in the same passenger airbag that they didn't catch on the front end that they're asking for a recall on. Once more, these manufacturers are trying to protect themselves in safety violation rules. Whenever you avoid safety violation rules, it doesn't matter if it's putting together an automobile, building a house, a residential house, or a commercialized commercialized structure, or you're involved in police work towards protecting people's lives. Whenever you avoid these principles, you are asking for trouble. Trouble such as you've never seen before. And this is what's coming down the pike, coming near a neighborhood near you.
Says he has no second thoughts about his decision to abandon the precinct.
We only had about 15 to 20 officers inside, with almost nothing to defend themselves with other than guns. Imagine what would have happened if they had continued to fight. There was hand-to-hand combat and likely a scenario of death.
So what now when you have almost a quarter of the police force in some form of absentee situation? I mean, that sounds like a significant staffing shortage.
We do have a staffing shortage right now, and I disagree with the notion that we should be abolishing the police department. Our officers are dealing with some very difficult situations.
Or they're not, according to many complaints. Ebony Chambers describes a recent incident outside her home in Minneapolis's largely black North Side.
There was about 4 teenagers walking down the middle of my street with guns out. My neighbor stood up to them, which I don't know why he did, but he said, "You guys need to please put the guns down. I'm calling the police." Called the police, never showed up. 15 minutes later, we heard about 30 shots being shot off. I don't know if the person they were shooting at lived or died or anything.
In another instance, she says police came to her door to tell her they'd given up chasing a suspect who had run through her backyard. And if she didn't like it, the officer said,
"You need to contact your mayor so that we can do our job."
Chambers and Donald Crumbly are part of a larger community organization called Isaiah. They say they're open to new ideas about public safety.
It's not about good police and bad police. We're past that. It's about right and wrong, and the community has to step up now because we've received enough injustice.
But Lisa Clemens, a former police officer who founded a community group called A Mother's Love, says the city council's actions haven't helped matters. She says they've only emboldened criminals.
When the city council came out with their statement of abolishing and dismantling and disbanding the police department.
If you're going to dismantle, abolishing the police department, that means that the police department is running off of the same set of rules that the civilians are running off of. That means you're running in a catastrophe, a formula of a catastrophe that's going to eventually catch up with everybody. If you're asking for the police department to be perfect, they're not going to be perfect. If you're asking for the police department to be better and to tweak and to re-engineer and to get things better than what they was, they can do that. But by saying that they can't make mistakes is impossible, because you're asking for people to do something that once more is impossible. Mistakes get made. The reason why the insurance companies calls an accident is because it was an unintended accident. Okay? We realize what went on with George Floyd should be looked upon as intentional. But two wrongs don't make a right. And it's not right for the town to be torn upside down over one person's mistake, or two persons' mistake, or three persons' mistake. Once more, the police needs to be put in check towards what the police does and what the police don't do. And whenever you're no longer policing or governing the safety and the well-being of the citizens of whatever country, then you have nothing more than thugs and chaos roaming the streets waiting for an accident to happen. And if that be the case, then society just needs to go ahead and stop doing what they're doing, take all the prisoners in federal, state, and local jails and let them out on society. If that's what society wants, let them out on society and give society a dose of their own medicine towards what they're asking for. Because that's exactly what they're asking for. You're going to have some sort of boundaries in what the police force can do, even at the event of a mistake or an accident. Now, if it's done intentional, that's different. You hold that particular police officer or that particular agency accountable. But you don't go mad all over the whole countryside towards going crazy. Now you're creating something, you have hijacked this movement, and now you're creating something that it never was intended to be. Now you're starting an uprising that could escalate into a civil war. No, I do not agree with releasing federal, state, and local lawbreakers that is already proven to be lawbreakers back out on the streets. Neither do I agree with turning thy cheek the way that societies had to turn their cheek over these bad officers. There has to be some sort of middle ground in people compromising pertaining to the safety and the well-being of society. If not, society won't no longer be a society.
Those incendiary terms, I think it created a lot of fear in the community, but it also at the same time created a brazen attitude. I think the community has been left to fend for themselves.
We're not trying to defund the police again.
Oh, you ain't seen the community fend for itself. Whenever you take all these governors and all these mayors that puts out an order, release all the prisoners. Federal, state, and local jails, open up and let them out on the road. Let them out on the streets. Then is when you'll see society fend for itself. This woman don't have a clue what she's talking about. Don't have a clue. They just think that they're scraping up against something.
We're not saying we don't need the police at all. We're just saying that there need to be a rebuilding of what they are. You know what I'm saying?
We need a full culture shift in our police department. Culture, to a certain extent, is about personnel. It's about people. So right now, when the chief or I terminate or discipline an officer, as much as 50% of the time, that officer gets returned right back to the department from which they came because of an arbitration system.
The mayor is going to have to recognize that, again, this is not a personnel problem, but a systems problem.
Okay, so you fix the system problem. And you don't fix the system problem by trying to overtake. This is overtaking the government. This is treason. This is treason, is what this is.
Councilman Ellison says the powerful police union would never concede on arbitration or other changes. What's needed, he says, is a complete revamp, moving funds into violence prevention, mental health care, and fixing other underlying causes of crime. He admits it will be a culture shift for the larger community.
And right now, all we really have,
and that's what needs to be done,
in terms of public safety, is one system, and that's policing. And people are going to be scared to create a new system of emergency response. And I think it's going to take a lot of conversations.
The council's immediate hurdle is to get voters to approve a city charter amendment that would allow it to phase out the police department and phase in a broader Office of Public Safety and Violence Prevention. For the PBS NewsHour, this is Fred DeSam-Lazaro in Minneapolis.
I knew this was going to be something very, very dramatic and serious. That's the reason why that God led me to go ahead and putting this on a memorial out here at the corner of 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 3255. I knew that this was going to be a historical event to the point that it needed to be documented, recorded, and basically chiseled in stone pertaining to what happened to George Floyd, which was a horrible, horrible event. But by going about this and the way that they're going about it, towards wanting to overpower the police force, you're just adding insult to misery. You think that you've seen problems. You ain't seen problems yet. You go to disembarking up onto something that we've already created, and there's no doubt it needs to be tweaked. It needs to be fine-tuned. These bad officers need to be weeded out. The bad officers is what caused the problems in the Windmill Ministry's life, pertaining to various officers up there in the land between the lakes, various officers right here in Weakley County, various officers and law enforcement agencies over there in Kenton, Tennessee, various officers over in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that wind up blowing up the back end of my truck simply because I was doing an investigation over there. It's various officers, but it was the agencies that supported these officers. Who are the agencies? You're talking about the mayor. You're talking about the council. You're talking about the people that walks around with suit and ties that wind up going to church every Sunday, sitting beside each other and rubbing shoulders with each other, knowing that probably one or the other or all of them has something to do with who knows what. It's corrupt at the core. You know how you attack it? At the core. As I said before, it's not the police officers that need to go to jail. It's those that are above the police officers. It's the commissioners. It's those that are in charge of the union. It's the mayors. It's the council board. It's those people that need to go to jail. No, not disembark towards not re-electing them into power again. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about physically walking up to them, putting handcuffs on them, and charging them for treasonous type, terrorist type activities. Because they have allowed for this to fester, grow, and become what it is here in America. And we're talking judges, we're talking lawyers, we're talking councilmen, we're talking governors, we're talking lieutenant governors, we're talking people that are above the police officers that need to be reprimanded for this. It's not no election going to clean this up, baby. There's no election going to clean this up. We think that we can roll it over to the next election. Roll it over to the next election and it'll get a little better. No, I tell you what it gets. It gets a little worse. It gets a little corrupted every time you do that because you're playing it out. The people that got us in this trouble to begin with never has to stand accountable. in the judicial system that they themselves are a part of towards becoming accountable. And whenever you have a system like this that's basically engulfing itself, regurgitating itself again and again and again, then you have nothing but corruption. You have nothing but pure, mere, absolute corruption. And it's the very thing that Donald Trump run his campaign off of towards draining the swamp. All right, Donald Trump, if you meant what you said about draining the swamp, let's see you drain the swamp. And you don't drain the swamp on the good end. You drain the swamp on the bad